Jasper. I'm a Dutch guy in my mid-20s, and I've been working as a security guard for about 3 years now. After being an event security officer for about 2 years, I started working for a security company that handled other kinds of jobs, including night shifts at places not related to events, and providing security at a few campgrounds. Since I worked a lot for this company and they grew to trust me, despite being a relatively new colleague, they asked me if I wanted to take on a job at one of these campgrounds, as it would provide a lot of hours. I agreed, thinking it would be a good opportunity to earn extra money and gain experience. Security is something I'm really passionate about. The work days and hours were long. I often worked 6 or 7 days a week, always in the evening from 8 p.m. to 3, 4, or sometimes even 5 a.m. For the sake of the story, I'll fast forward a bit. Quite a few things happened during that time, such as drunk guests, a man overdosing in his caravan, and even a woman having a schizophrenic episode in the middle of the night. In any case, none of those events stood out compared to what I'm about to tell you. The campground was large, and I was given a bicycle to get around more easily. One of my primary tasks was to patrol the grounds, since there was a curfew after 10 p.m., after which kids and teens weren't allowed to wander outside their tents or hang around playgrounds. While I built a pretty good rapport with the younger crowd, they were still kids, and they didn't really follow the rules. This led to the manager of the campground and my supervisor expanding my duties. Behind the campground, there was a forest with a large outdoor theater where music events were occasionally held. While it technically wasn't part of the campground, the kids would often go there at night and gather behind the stage. This was illegal, since you're not allowed to be in forests after sunset in the Netherlands, and it also violated the campground's curfew rules. So I was assigned to check the forest and the theater during my patrols. Now, I'm a big guy, about 6'5", and well-trained in self-defense, so a pitch-black forest didn't really scare me. I had caught kids out there plenty of times by sneaking up on them. Of course, to do that, it's important to stay quiet and low, which meant I didn't use my flashlight most of the time. One night, while patrolling as usual, I went into the forest to check it out. If you were really quiet, you could sometimes hear kids sneaking around the theater, laughing in the distance. That was the case this night, too. I sighed, thinking they still hadn't learned their lesson, even after multiple warnings and the manager threatening to kick them out. I biked to the edge of the campground where the lights and paved paths ended. I could hear whispering and quiet laughter in the distance, so I parked my bike and moved into the forest without my flashlight, staying as quiet as possible. When I reached the theater, nobody was there. I turned on my flashlight to make sure they weren't hiding, since they had done that before, but I couldn't find anyone. The faint whispers continued, but now they were coming from another direction. I knew there was a watchtower further ahead with a bench underneath it. I had caught kids hanging out there before, so I figured that's where they went. I moved through the forest toward the tower and stood behind a tree, watching the bench. Again, nobody was there. At this point, I still wasn't creeped out. I figured they had spotted me and were messing with me. My last thought was that maybe they had climbed all the way up the tower. The whispers stopped. Then suddenly, I heard a young man scream from above me. I immediately turned on my flashlight and pointed it toward the high watchtower. That's when it happened. It all happened incredibly fast, yet I remember it like it was in slow motion. A cloud-like humanoid shape, a pitch-black silhouette, appeared to fall from the tower at an unnatural speed. I only caught a glimpse of it as it passed through the beam of my flashlight. It was upside down, like it had been thrown head first from the top. It landed just a few feet away from me with a loud thud. Then, silence. I froze, convinced I had just witnessed someone die right in front of me. I widened the beam of my flashlight and scanned the ground around the tower. There was nothing. No body, no sound, not even disturbed ground. My heart started pounding louder and louder as the forest grew completely still. At first, I thought I might have been hallucinating. I was exhausted from the long hours, and maybe it was just a shadow crossing my flashlight beam, creating an illusion. But that wouldn't explain the thud or the scream. I ran back to my bike and rode straight to the bar, where the entertainment team usually stayed late. I told them what happened, and one of the women took me outside. She told me that the year before I started working there, a teenage boy had fallen from that tower and died on the spot. They never found out if it was an accident or if someone pushed him. After that, I refused to go back into that area. The fear was so strong that I ended up faking my reports, lying about me having been to the forest to check. I still don't know if I was just hallucinating and imagining things, but I am a spiritual person, and this could truly have been the echo or even spirit of the boy.
I have this traumatic childhood memory that I cannot forget. Sometimes I dream about it or just think about it late at night when I can't sleep and I'm feeling stressed. It sucks, and I thought maybe posting about it might help me get over it a little. So I'm sending this to you today, and when I was a kid, we were always struggling for money. I feel like we moved houses maybe 6 or 7 times, usually a downgrade to a much cheaper property, even a trailer one time, followed by a big upgrade because my dad never lived within our means. As soon as he had a bit of dough, we started spending it, living in luxury. It was kind of sweet. He wanted to provide for me, my mom, and my baby brother, but he just wasn't good at keeping hold of money. When he had a good job, we'd get takeout food every day, and he'd shower us with toys and mom with gifts. Then we'd lose everything and end up in some dirty-ass trailer park or something, and everyone would be stressed. Dad would never take it out on us, but he'd take it out on himself, smoking and drinking and falling into a stupor, so it took longer to break out of the rut and find the next job. I never really knew what my father did for work. He didn't have a profession exactly. He took on random jobs and schemes pretty much. He was always looking for his latest get-rich-quick gimmick, and if I'd try to list or even remember most of them, I'd probably be here all night. One time, he sold cigarettes out of the back of his car until the law shut him down. Another time, he got a group of parolee friends working as home decorators until a client realized that he didn't have the necessary licenses and insurance when one of the guys fell through the roof. It was just things like this, all the time, and while he was a fun dad, it also made my childhood incredibly stressful, especially after my baby brother Barton was born and wouldn't stop crying all the time. The specific memory that sticks in my mind happened when we were renting a fairly nice house in the suburbs. I guess Dad's latest scheme had been paying off because things had been going well for a while, and I was beginning to let myself relax. I remember the sun was setting, so that it must have been mid-evening when the knock on the door came. I knew my mom and dad were downstairs with Barton, so I was surprised when the knock sounded again and nobody answered. I looked out the window of my bedroom at the front of the house. A guy was standing at the door. He looked up at me, and something about him terrified me. I know it's silly, but in my head I kind of equate him to that Rocksteady character from the Ninja Turtles. You know that big rhinoceros with a tank top, khaki pants, and big boots? This guy reminded me of him, only, human. He had this mullet that looked ex-army and an earring that kind of glinted in one ear and tattoos all up his thick, muscled arms. He must have caught sight of me looking at him because he looked up and kind of scowled at me from under a very thick, ugly unibrow. I know I'm probably imagining him as more troll-like and terrifying in my mind than he actually was, but I guess that's how childhood traumas kind of get at you, I guess. And I'm going to call him Rocksteady, but he began hammering on the front door with a very meaty fist. He shouted that he knew we were home. He'd seen someone in the upstairs window. An instant terror and guilt flooded through me. Immediately, I heard footsteps downstairs, Dad going to the front door and Mom coming upstairs. My bedroom door opened just as I heard the front door unlatch. Mom was holding Barton, reassuring me that everything was okay and to come back into the room and play. I ignored her and ran to the window. Dad had stepped outside into the front yard with Rocksteady, and Rocksteady was sizing up Dad, looming over him very menacingly. And my dad wasn't a fighter. He wasn't a buff guy who worked out. He was fairly short, and in my mind, he was fragile. He was always smiling and joking and being silly, and the idea of someone like Rocksteady hurting him seemed like a genuine possibility. Even more so as I watched this guy grab Dad by his shirt and drag him into the street. I started to cry and bang on the window, but Mom came and pulled me away and made me play with Barton for a bit, even though inside I was absolutely breaking. After 5 minutes or so, Mom had to use the bathroom, so I darted to the window again. Dad and Rocksteady were in the street. Dad was pacing back and forth, gesturing and talking animatedly in his way, and Rockstar seemed calmer and was leaning up against a muscle car. I watched as Dad and Rockstar shook hands, and then Dad came back into the house. He was all smiles and cheery after that. Nothing to worry about, he said. Just a simple misunderstanding. Rocksteady was a guy he worked with and his paycheck hadn't gone through, but it was all sorted out now and everything had been squared away. I told my dad that man reminded me of the Rhino from Ninja Turtles, and he seemed to find that hilarious. I thought Mom was calm and fine too, but in retrospect, she clearly wasn't. I went to bed more relaxed that night. It was around 1 a.m. when I heard the crash. It was coming from downstairs, the sound of wood splintering and the front door being kicked in. I looked out the window in terror to see 3 men coming through our front door, and Rocksteady was taking up the rear. There was commotion from elsewhere upstairs, Mom and Dad reacting to the break-in, I now know, and then smashing and breaking glass from downstairs, and next, screaming and yelling. I could now hear 4 male voices, including my father's, and then my mom screaming. Finally, Barton started crying, adding to the cacophony, and Mom's footsteps came thundering upstairs. I'd already locked my door, and she rattled on it. I asked who it was, and she said it was Mom. She said it was good that I'd locked my door and to keep it locked and stay there, and she was going to take Barton into their room. She told me not to come out under any circumstances, and that Daddy was fine, and not to worry. His friends had just come over and they were just being loud. Even at my young age, I knew that this was all nonsense, but I told Mom I'd stay put. So I had to sit there on my bed listening to the 3 men smash up our things downstairs. Dad was yelling for a while, and then I heard another crash, and his voice stopped. I was crying to myself, these heavy sobs, and I felt like my chest was going to burst and my heart would explode. It felt like the chaos went on forever. Eventually, things fell silent and I thought I was safe. And suddenly there was a hammering on my door. The wooden frame shuddered and I screamed. A male voice I didn't recognize called out, telling me to open the door. I'll just call this one Creepshow. And he called me a little B-word and said that if I was Colin's daughter, Colin was my dad, I was gonna suffer. Creepshow started saying all these awful things he was going to do to me that I don't want to repeat here. Stuff that as a little kid I'd never even heard of before. I was still sobbing, crying, and freaking out. Then I heard a bang from out in the hallway, like someone punching a wall. A voice asked what the F Creepshow was talking about, and I recognized the voice as that Rocksteady guy. Creepshow said that Colin's daughter, the little B-word, was hiding in here and he was going to drag her out and show Colin what happened to the daughters of men who don't pay up. Rocksteady absolutely lost it. He started screaming at this guy, saying that I was only 7 years old and what kind of sicko threatens a kid. That they were just here to scare Colin to get what they were owed. But this was way over the line. Creepshow didn't back down and started hurling abuse at Rocksteady. There was a moment of silence, and then suddenly my door came splintering open. A man I didn't even recognize, who I later learned was Creepshow, flew backwards into the room, having just been drop-kicked probably through the door by that Rocksteady guy. And now Rocksteady rushed into the room, grabbed Creepshow from the floor, dragged him up and threw him out. He looked at me, and the terrifying guy I'd been so afraid of suddenly melted away, and his face softened. I've never seen someone transform like that before or since. Rocksteady told me he was sorry. He didn't really mean for things to go this way. And then he returned to beating the absolute crap out of Creepshow for daring to threaten a little girl like that. The outcome of this story is truly bizarre. Rocksteady genuinely felt so bad about bringing that kind of person to our house that he even offered to pay Dad for the damage. Dad was a bit bruised and scared, but ultimately okay. He didn't really want to call the cops because, well, whatever he was involved in probably wasn't very legal. Rocksteady and the other guy, who was just some sidekick that I'd never even saw, promised that they'd take Creepshow away and deal with him. Dad told us later that the three men were some bikers he'd hired to work on a project with him, and something had gone wrong with paying them apparently. He made things right with Rocksteady, and after that, Dad went completely straight. I guess it took my life being threatened to finally wake him up. Dad passed away recently, and he lived an honest life ever since that day. I have no idea what happened to Rocksteady or that Creepshow guy, and it's not Rocksteady who causes me to wake up at night, panicking and scared. It's Creepshow. The things he said to me through that door, the punishments he promised to beat out of me, they're not anything that a 7-year-old girl should ever have to hear. No, I'm sure Creepshow isn't even alive anymore. When Rocksteady drop-kicked him through my bedroom door, he looked like he must have been in his 50s even then. He'd had to have been over 80 by now, so I can only hope that he died in pain and misery. But sometimes late at night, I imagine he's still out there, walking up the stairs to my bedroom door. And this time my dad and Rocksteady are no longer around to stop him.